Anime horror. What the fuck is even up with that? Everyone loves it, everyone wants it, and yet everyone also always bemoans the lack of it. For good reason, frankly. Relative to how strong the desire for it is, we just don't get much horror in anime. And it seems like more than half the time we do, it's actually a comedy anime in disguise. Curse you, Mizushima! And most other times, it's horribly botched. Looking at you, Junji Ito Collection. We get our occasional gems, of course everyone remembers Higurashi, but there's just so few greats to hold up relative to just about any other genre. So it's with immense joy that I present to you a new member of that exclusive pantheon of great horror anime, Happy Sugar Life. Now hey, Shiki was pretty fantastic this decade as well, that's definitely up there too, and I can't fault you at all for preferring it to Happy Sugar Life, but squabbling over which is better isn't what we're here for. Instead, let's just revel for a bit in the joy of good anime horror, as I do some explaining about what makes HSL so damn effective. Let's lay it all out up front. This is a yandere age gap yuri show that involves a relationship between the adorable young girl Shio and Sato, a high schooler. I understand if you find that distasteful. Please feel free to cleanse your palate with the complimentary bottles of fluffy yuri we've got laid out for you on that table over there. For those of you who can look past that premise, let me introduce you to the world of Happy Sugar Life. This is primarily a psychological horror. Everyone is traumatized, they're all evil, nobody except the shining beacon of hope and purity Shio is innocent. Now, the series paints that trauma with a somewhat heavy-handed brushstroke. Mitsuboshi gets kept as a sex captive by the older woman that is his employer for a few days, and ends up in a room plastered with Shio's face and huffing her wanted posters. He's left with an intense, crippling fear of women his age and older, and because he feels deeply dirtied by what was done to him, he's obsessed with Shio as a means of purifying himself. Is this particularly accurate to how the trauma left by rape manifests itself? No, not really, and this level of over-the-top craziness would be an unfair way to suggest rape victims tend to end up. However, fiction doesn't need to be true to life, and it doesn't need to be realistic. What fiction needs to do is make the things that happen feel real, and it's in that regard that I think the series really excels. Yes, the results are dialed up a notch, but sexual abuse as a minor can lead to abusive interests towards minors yourself. And that's what Happy Sugar Life really plays with, our fears of what lasting effects on us trauma can have. It presents a world where people are a tad more susceptible to that trauma, and explores that uncomfortable part of ourselves. Higurashi certainly isn't trying to portray its characters as acting how real people do, but it doesn't need to. It speaks to deeper anxieties about what people can do if they're pushed, and does so well. The abuse Shio's mother receives from her husband leaves her in a pretty out there state of fear and overbearingness. But that fear of hers, the fear that she'll end up turning into the same monster her husband was, is genuine, and actually lands true with its emotional potency. As does her anguish when she does step over that line into physical abuse herself. This stuff possesses a general trueness to life that circumvents the need for strict realism to be effective and really unsettling. Perhaps the most unsettling element to the series, however, is how well it manages to get us into Sato's perspective. Even if it hasn't gotten you to actively root for her by the end of episode 1, Happy Sugar Life will certainly have made you understand her. Things are very stacked against Sato. And hey, maybe things should be stacked against you if you're attempting to keep a missing child hidden in your home, but just like everyone around her, she's trying to cope with her trauma. Shio allowed her to break free from a cycle of lovelessly banging guys hoping to feel something, and the instant relief Shio brings to Sato is so palpable. Is it still super unhealthy? Yeah, but the fact that unlike a lot of other people, Sato's relief doesn't require the active, immediate harm of others makes it easier to side with her, to fall into the trap of getting caught up in her reasoning. And that's what makes her such a compelling yandere character, the fact that she is very reasoned. While she isn't opposed to making things bloody if they've got to be, she restrains those violent instincts in a lot of cases because actually, killing people is not a great way of remaining discreet. The yandere fun she brings is less in cleaving people willy-nilly, but watching her out-reason people, break them down and deconstruct them until they're helpless before her. In addition to Happy Sugar Life being one of anime's best horrors, I think Sato is one of its best yanderes, another sought-after rarity for many. But even with the strength of its psychological elements, what would a horror anime be without a few well-executed jump scares?
しおちゃんに会いたい?
Happy Sugar Life nails these, having multiple really effective spooks throughout its run. The direction of them is just so stellar, always making a character pop out from wherever we absolutely would not be anticipating them to be, and usually in moments that aren't already tense, catching us unaware when we thought we were safe. And of course, that directorial prowess isn't limited to the scares. While it's all around excellent throughout, always setting the perfect mood and constructing an enhancing visual metaphor, the highlight has to be episode 8. For the first 9 minutes of the episode, we learn about a character whose voice we never hear and whose face we never see, getting into his shoes and experiencing this brilliant little self-contained arc about his idolization of Sato for being the sad, messed up person she is, only for his world to shatter once she gains some happiness for herself. He's characterized only by the position he occupies as our first-person camera for this section, and the mess of noise that serves as his voice, letting us hear when he hesitantly pauses before responding without actually knowing what that response is. It's a truly inspired piece of filmmaking, and it was the series director himself who directed and storyboarded this episode. Considering that his only prior directed series was My Girlfriend is a Show Bitch, it's so fantastic that he got to show his legitimate talent with Happy Sugar Life. You could certainly judge the series as a bit gratuitous and exploitative, and I won't fault you for doing so. However, I think it holds some value in spite of that as a piece of media. It has something prescient to say, and it says it very effectively. I hope this doesn't just sound like, Goblin Slayers is actually an important series, because it's important to know that rape is real. Argument to you, but there's a helpful catharsis to be had in seeing this exaggerated exploration of these fears about being trapped by our experiences. In spite of the fact that I was shouting, no, 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 bad idea at my TV whenever Sato and Shio started exchanging wedding vows, Happy Sugar Life got me effectively caught up in the tone it was setting and the ideas it set out to mull over. It ain't the deepest thing out there. This boy is very schlocky, but in spite of all the odds stacked against it, the series ended up emerging a really solid horror anime. And hey, I literally realized just now that it's October, so consider this the month's spooky recommendation from me to you. If you were starving for horror anime, I hope I managed to curb that craving of yours just a bit. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in 2 days. Well, after the massive controversy that was the Goblin Slayer video, I'm happy to get back to more positivity. For those of you who were asking, no, I don't plan to make that hyper-aggressive approach the norm. Though it is depressing that that video did so much better than anything else of mine for a while. Plenty of people say they didn't like it, but it was the only video of mine they'd clicked on in months. So there you go, the dark beast that is YouTube. However, thankfully I get to avoid feeding that beast too often because of Patreon. If you'd like to help me remain free from having to cater to YouTube's nonsense, head on over to Patreon to support me. A huge thanks goes out to Psyker, Mathwiz97, Jonathan Conley, Skylar Morrow, Tyler Monk, Sakamoto Mio, Tincho37, Josh Grant, Lord Liquid Bacon III, Elaine Aldfelt, David McCown, Hijort Dog, Smokeweed Sephiroth 420, J-Man 4747, Jedi 168, Peach Plum, and everyone else who's supporting that effort already.